Dear students, in this session we will look at the migration, but its positive and negative impacts. I am sure you have learned the patterns of migration and also the major determinants of migration and migration theories, but we will look at certain positives and certain negatives in migration. In the process, we will also examine the migration process in the country and how the positives and negatives in migration display in the context of different regions in the country. As you know, the migration is a form of geographical mobility between one geographical unit to another, generally involving a change of residence. It is also defined by many and particularly by population geographers as the permanent or semi-permanent change of residence with no restrictions of distance. In simple words, it involves crossing of geographical boundary permanently or semi-permanently, even seasonally or even periodically. Migration is one of the three components of demography because the fertility, the mortality and migration determines the population composition, age distribution, future population size and so on. Like in fertility, migration is a matter of choice. In weak economies of Asia, Africa and Latin America, migration is adopted as a family survival strategy. For a vast country like India, the study of the movement of population from one region to other parts of the country helps in understanding the dynamics of the society, the dynamics of development and dynamics of the geographical patterns. It is also a sign of vast disparities in economic and social conditions between the place of origin and the place of destination. In the era of urbanization, most of the states are undergoing faster economic development, particularly in areas such as manufacturing, information technology or service sector, but inequality is still high among states and people who are migrating to overcome this disparity. Migration is now recognized as an important factor in influencing all aspects of the society, especially in developing countries. In the Indian census record that in 2001, around 309 million persons were migrants based on the place of the last residence, which constitute about 30% of the total population of the country. This figure indicates an increase of around 37% from the census 1991, which recorded around 226 million as migrants. There are 144 million migrants in 1961, which has been increased to 307 million in 2001 by the place of birth definition, which shows a steady increase in the migration in India. Some of the terms associated with the migration needs to be understood if we have to understand the negatives and positives of migration. Firstly, the place of origin and the place of destination. The place of origin is where the migration originates. The place from where people migrate is called the place of origin, and the place to which the people is migrating or moving is called the place of destination. The migrants, the population can be also divided into two other categories, migrants and non-migrants. The persons involved in the process of migration or movement, at least for once during the migration intervals, is known as migrants. But if a person's place of enumeration is different from the place of, is not different from the place of usual residence or place of birth, then he will be regarded as non-migrants. There are also many push and pull factors associated with migration, because the push factors are the poverty, unemployment, discrimination, landlessness, all push people out of the place of origin. And the pull factors definitely are vacancies, availability of job, better education, safety, economic advancement, which attracts people to move out from one place to other. We also distinguish between migrants and immigrants. Moving from one country to another country is called emigration. Receiving migrants from other countries is called immigration. But if the movement of the people are within a country, it is referred as internal migration, and usually in migration and out migration refers the people coming in and people moving out. Migration is also associated with large amount of remittances. The sending of money, gift and other goods and services are part of any migrant history. So, migrant families therefore are endowed with remittances in terms of money, gift and other goods and articles. There are different distinction is made to understand the types of migration. Firstly, there are permanent temporary migration, seasonal migration, daily commuting, etc., which can be classified based on the duration of the stay of a particular person. In the permanent migration, people shifted to some new places for whole life or never go back to their native place. The temporary migration movies to some extent is time specific, might go back to the native place after some period of time. There are seasonal migration associated with seasons, particularly depending on the opportunities in terms of economic and employment opportunities. For instance, there can be seasonal migration in terms of calamities like flood prone areas. People move from one place to another. In rainy season, people also travel one place to another to avoid natural calamities as well as in search of better jobs. And from the mountainous regions, people migrate seasonally, and summer regions also there can be migration from very hot places to much lesser hotter places. In migration, there is also called commuting, which is daily migration. It is known as commuting because it involves movement of people for a shorter distance. People from rural areas to smaller towns and come back to the rural areas in the same day or occasionally. It is also possible that people move from rural areas to smaller towns and then move to bigger cities near to the workplace and start commuting almost daily or at least occasionally. As we already pointed out, we have in-migration and out-migration, and in-migration minus out-migration gives you the extent of net migration. There are also 4 types of movement we can see in migration patterns. One is from the rural areas to urban areas, which is called rural urban migration, and we can also move from one urban areas to another urban areas, which is urban to urban migration. Into rural to urban migration, particularly in the developing countries like India, most of the people live in rural regions, and those who are in the rural regions first migrate to the smaller urban cities or growing cities, and people started moving in search of job and primarily to get jobs outside the agricultural sector in which they are currently working. In the urban to urban migration, internal migration involves the migration of people from one urban pockets to another. The migration can also be defined as rural to rural migration, that is people migrating from one rural areas to another rural areas. It can be maybe because of the low productivity of agriculture in one areas compared to other areas, and also because of the high population concentration in some places compared to other places, and with better quality of land, better agricultural prospects, and so on and so forth. There is also a small proportion of the population migrate from urban to rural areas. It is not very common in developing countries. The countries which have experienced the phenomenon of urbanization very rarely move from urban to rural areas, but there are pockets of movement from urban to rural areas as well. International migration, which involves crossing of national boundary, have associated with several restrictions. Therefore, it all depends on the policies of each country in attracting laborers from other regions of the world. If people are moving from one country to another, the country with the intention to settle down for some period or permanently, then it is termed as international migration. There are several factors associated with the migration. There are natural causes, there are economic reasons, there are social cultural reasons, there are demographic reasons, there are political reasons, are all discussed in various studies and literature associated with migration. A high quality migrant, meaning well educated, economically strong and skilled, will move as a result of pull factors, but a low quality migrants with low education, economically poor, migrate because of the push factors of the place of origin. Factors responsible for migration are, particularly for the push factors responsible, are natural calamities, climate change, poverty, unemployment, unsafe social environment, social exclusion on the basis of caste, color, economic conditions, low quality of educational institutions, low quality of health care, inequitable distribution of resources, and overpopulation. As we have already pointed out, there are several pull factors associated with migration, which are employment opportunity, higher wages, better educational facilities, better health facilities, safety, access to technology, diverse culture, freedom of expressing views, better quality of life, and so on and so forth. We will now come back to some issues of the data available on migration in India, and then look at what are the positive and negative impacts of migration. There are different data sources which is available in India to understand migration, and primarily the census give a very vital information on migrants in the country. Census defines migration based on two characteristics. One is place of birth, and second, the place of last residence. The place of birth definition involves that if any person's current residence is different from the place of birth of that person, he or she is defined as migrants. In the case of last place of residence, the place of birth is not asked, but whether actually the last place of residence is different from the current place of residence, then he or she is defined as a migrant. The census also asks yet another question on the duration of migration, which gives you an idea about the type of residence the migrant is, whether they are permanent, semi-permanent, or commuting, or is temporary in nature. This Indian census have been asking this question since from 1981, all this information, and has a large set of data published by age, sex, and other various characteristics. In addition, in India, National Sample Survey Organization also collect information once in 10 years or so on migration, which gives you vital information on the characteristics of the migrants' attitude, as well as the information on remittances in the case of international as well as national migrants. Let us now turn to the aspects of positive and negative aspects of migration which is the focus of this lecture. There is different positive impact of migration both in the place of origin and in the place of destination. As such, there are also different negative impacts of migration in the place of origin and place of destination. The positive impacts of migration in the place of origin are: 1. It is less burden on land and resources, because the migration is typically between rural and urban areas. The rural areas are often associated with huge burden on the land and the resources. So, this will relieve that burden from the rural areas. Secondly, less competition for economic opportunities within a limited geographical area. So, migration spreads the people or relocates people from one geographical area to another geographical area where opportunities are higher. That way, there is a fair redistribution of economic opportunities. There is also a reduction in conflicts because of the migration, in case there are conflicts in a particular area. So, which will reduce the conflicts, because the people who are inflicted by the conflicts are often left from that geographical region. Yet another major positive impact of migration is the remittances. The studies have shown that vital impact of remittances on the well-being of families in the place of origin. So, remittances play a vital role in enhancing the economic standard of the people in many contexts and even in many states in India. Fifthly, migration also helps in spreading the technology and spreading new ideas, not only in the place of destination, but even in the place of origin. As the migrants also have contact in the place of origin, the technology as well as ideas learned at the place of destination is also spread to the place of origin, and vice versa. Sixthly and finally, the contracts, savings and skill development which happens in the case of migration as well as return migrants is significant for the development of any nation or any society. These are primarily the positive impact of migration in the place of origin. Not only for the place of origin, but we also see that there are several positive impacts of migration in the place of destination. For instance, first, the employment opportunities which are available in the place of destination are filled because of the migration. That way, the scarcity of labor is significantly addressed in the place of destination. Secondly, the labor demand can be fulfilled and labor scarcity are avoided. Thirdly, the major problem that face the place of destination, like skill gap, can be recovered depending upon the quality of the migration. Often, the place of destination attracts people of such skill so that it can actually fill that skill gap in a particular industry or particular region. Fourthly, the economic growth of that region can be sustained because of the migrants, because migrants significantly contribute to the economic growth of the place of destination. Thus, the place of destination gets several advantages in terms of economic growth and sustainability because of the migrants. Fifthly, the business can be transformed with new ideas and also with rigor and enthusiasm in the place of destination, because new migrants also create different opportunities in terms of demands for the goods and services in the place of destination. So, it creates a conducive business environment and creates sufficient demand in the place of destination for other related businesses. There are several other benefits. It also helps in diffusion of cultures, because the place of destination also will be exposed to different cultures which otherwise have been monoculture in nature. Also, it gives new ideas and innovative ideas to the host place, and undoubtedly economically more tax will be collected and can fill the major fiscal aspects of that region, and it also helps in providing pension services and other social security benefits to the large sections of the population in the place of destination because of the large tax which will be provided by the migrants community. That way, migration has several positive impacts both at the place of destination and at the place of origin. But it is also important to understand that there are also several negative impacts of migration both at the place of destination and the place of origin. The major negative impact of the place of origin are: first, the loss of labor force, because the skilled labor manpower of a particular place of origin is lost and is taken away by the place of destination. Naturally, it will become a loss to the country or to the region which had a better labor force, which is losing on the process. Perhaps it is also an economic disadvantage for the region. If the migrants are from the better sections of the society in terms of their education and in terms of their skill level, naturally it will be a greater loss for the place of origin. It is also often found that there is a sex selection in migration, and the sex ratio imbalance also creates due to migration in the place of origin. Many often, most of the males will be migrated from rural areas to urban areas, resulting in the women's or elderly left behind at the place of origin. There are also associated marriage squeeze because of the large migration of people from place of origin to the place of destination, and as pointed out, the proportion of population who are left behind will be from certain sections of either elderly or younger age cohort than the adult age cohort which are in the marriageable age. Loss of highly trained people in teaching, healthcare, IT professional, etc. are also often found as a very negative impact of migration in a particular place of origin. There are also different social problems associated with migration at the place of origin, because the migrants, if it is from the better sections of the society, meaning in terms of education level, skill level, all those things, what will be left behind will be also the persons without adequate skill, adequate education level, and also with the financial backing, which will create problems for the place of origin. And the left behind children, women and aged suffers in the absence of wider family circle, which is a serious sociological issue which needs to be addressed. There are also problems with the large scale migration which is happening, because there can be spread of communicable diseases if the place of origin initially was able to control communicable diseases. With the greater interaction with the other places, many other diseases can also crop up in the process of migration. And it is also found that marriage dissolution and divorces, etc. are many often common in the process of large scale migration. These are primarily the negative impacts of migration at the place of origin, and we also find there are several negative impacts of migration in the place of destination. Firstly, many often it is found that the place of destination is overpopulated, especially in the urban areas, where the areas where attract large scale migration also are the places where there is considerable overpopulation. It also unfortunately leads to further unemployment and underemployment, and later leads to lower wages in situation where there is labor surplus, and more burden on the land and resources are placed on the place of destination because of the migration, and human trafficking and crimes becomes very common in larger cities, which attracts huge migration inflow of migrants. There can be also a probability of conflicts between migrants and locals, which are normally experienced in many parts of the country or in many countries across the world. We also found labor surplus and people to work for lower wages, and which lead to less innovation and zero skill development in the place of destination. Migration is also leading to formation of slums, because when the poor sections migrate to the urban areas, it is unaffordable for these sections to live in the good housing situations, leading to formation of slums in these big cities. This leads to congestion and other related health and problems due to migration. We have already discussed a large number of negative and positive aspects of migration. Although migration is a driving force both in terms of demography, both in terms of economics, both in terms of sociological aspects, migration also has its own negative as well as positive. But it is also clear that in any countries with the course of development, migration also enhances. So it is important to find out how to address effectively the migration rather than to controlling migration, because migration is here to stay, and adequately addressing them through policy and program instruments will be the better way to address such an issue. Thank you.